The United States Senator Ed Markey is our guest this morning. Let's go on the record. The state's junior senator has decades of experience on Capitol Hill. Post-midterms, Democrats still hold the majority in the upper chamber. But what will the dynamics be with the Republican-controlled House? The senator's here this morning. Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
And welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. As you can see, Senator Ed Markey is with us this morning. He is a Democrat, winning his Senate seat in the special election in 2013 and the re-election in 2014 and 2020. And before that, he served in the House beginning in 1976, the Massachusetts House before that. Malden native, he holds a BA and law degree from BC. Great to see you as always. Happy post-Thanksgiving. Thanks for coming in.
No, great to be with you, Ed.
Great to have you in the chair.
Janet?
Full of turkey, aren't we?
Full of turkey. We want the leftovers now.
Yes, that's the best sometimes, I think. Let's dive into this. You're not exactly what I would call Elon Musk fan. Someone with your permission, of course, impersonated you and managed to outfox him. Now he wants Donald Trump back on Twitter, although who knows how long that standoff is going to last. So I know you're saying right now that you're not going to cancel your account on Twitter, but is there a time at which you might?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump now says he's not going back on Twitter because he's created his own alternative site. But it wasn't a good sign that he was invited back on. And what I did was to say to Elon Musk, number one, what went wrong? How could individuals impersonate other people for $8 with a Twitter blue check?
Not just another person. You're a United States Senator.
Exactly, and that is at the heart of the issue. So, so someone could impersonate the CDC for $8, pay for it, not be authenticated, and then on that site saying CDC, say vaccinations are not good for you.
Although
that's a public health and safety problem. And so that's what happened in that first 48 hours. That's what I was trying to point out, that if they can impersonate Eli Lilly, the CDC, a senator from Massachusetts, then anyone could impersonate anyone they wanted to and then spew out misinformation into the public sphere. So I've asked Elon Musk, one, to tell me what went wrong, and two, what he's going to do to fix it, to put the guardrails, the safety measures in place, because it's all about trust. It's not what anyone says on Twitter, it's can they impersonate who is saying that on Twitter, because that can lead to serious adverse impacts for our democracy, but for the public health and safety.
But if you are not satisfied with what you're asking him to assure you, would you cancel your account?
Well, we'll see. He's now indicated he's going to delay in relaunching his Twitter blue check program.
Right.
And he was going to do it on November 29th, and now he says he's going to delay it. So hopefully he's hearing me. Hopefully he's going to respond, because the job of Congress, of a member of the United States Senate serving on the Commerce Committee, is to make sure that there aren't per se violations of Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act, an unfair and deceptive act which is perpetrated upon the general public. So we'll see at that point in time whether or not those safeguards, those guardrails are sufficient to give the public the information they need to make sure that whoever is speaking is in fact that person.
Of the, what, 500,000 followers you have, is he one of them?
I think he follows me more closely today than he did a couple of weeks ago, and I think he
knows
understands
who you are now.
I think he understands the role of Congress a lot better today than he did before. He's a rocket scientist, but democracy is more complicated than rocket science, and he's now delved into an area which has been fraught with problems over the last several years, and he is not going to escape the kind of scrutiny necessary to make sure that we don't have a further increase, acceleration of the hate speech, of the misrepresentation that has been occurring over the last several years.
Which is a perfect segue. You know, the next topic we'd like to talk about is another once billionaire, Sam Bankman-Fried, spent years lobbying Congress on behalf of his now bankrupt cryptocurrency exchange FTX. His company executives donated more than $40 million to members of Congress as of this past summer. Did Congress wait too long to do anything?
I think that cryptocurrency has to come under intense investigation. We need a regulatory framework to be built around cryptocurrency. What happens in each one of these areas of new financial instruments is the big guys clean up on the way up, and the little guy gets cleaned out on the way down because there aren't safeguards. There isn't protections. There isn't transparency. So I think that we need a new era of tough regulation over cryptocurrency. And by the way, on the side, the cryptocurrency companies, just 7 of them in America, they now consume 2% of all energy in our country, enough energy to light up every single home in America on a daily basis. So they're escaping environmental regulation as well.
For the record, have you taken any crypto industry money yourself?
Oh, no. I have been a big skeptic of cryptocurrency right from the very beginning. I was the chairman over Wall Street for 8 years. So on all the insider trading laws, they're my laws. All the program trading laws, they're the ones I put on the books. When Salomon Brothers collapsed, I had to negotiate a new set of safeguards for government securities. So I've been policing this area for a long, long time to make sure that there is complete transparency so that public investors are not put at the mercy of greedy individuals who are hawking new products, but only under the guise of their own self-enrichment.
I want to talk about another branch of government. Reports alleging leaks of Supreme Court decisions now center on Justice Samuel Alito and his wife. This involves 2 abortion opinions. Do you think this is a wider problem involving other justices and staffers, or do you suspect this is sort of like a one-off situation?
I have no idea. I do know that in general, if you look at Justice Alito, you look at Justice Thomas and the relationship with his wife, that we're in a whole new era here, where politics has insinuated itself into the Supreme Court, where, in fact, let's be honest, the Supreme Court justices, the last 3 of them who have been named and confirmed, are all part of a plot, a dark money plot. Leonard Leo, this right-wing Heritage Foundation, Federalist Society fanatic, is now bragging about their ability to put together a plan to name these 3 new Supreme Court justices. So politics in the Supreme Court right now is synonymous. It goes back to the decision on dark money that Justice Roberts was the author of back about 15 years ago. And unfortunately, it's continuing to lead to a deterioration of the confidence the public has in the Supreme Court, because the more we learn about the political shenanigans of these families, is the more it undermines the legitimacy of the court itself.
So are you saying the leaks and the problems as far as politics infiltrating the court are only on the right now, or, I mean, only coming from the political right? Yeah,
they actually had a plan that they put in place and they executed to take over the Supreme Court. But you have no problems with any of the other justices, or it's just these 2? I have no knowledge of anything with regard to the other Supreme Court justices, but in the cases that you're mentioning, there's real question marks there. I mean, arched eyebrows that would hit the ceiling in terms of the questionable behavior which is being engaged in.
Next item, a UN climate agreement was approved this week calling on rich countries to pay for damages in poor nations. First, with a Republican-controlled House, how likely is it the U.S. will pump more dollars into this fund?
That's the historic nature of the agreement that was reached in Egypt. I was there for 4 days in order to just let the delegates there know from the 200 countries around the world that we had finally passed an ambitious climate bill, that we had $369 billion that passed, that Joe Biden has signed with no Republican support, that will unleash fully a wind and solar, all-electric vehicle, battery storage technology revolution in our country, creating millions of jobs and having environmental justice at its heart, so that the Chelseas and the Roxburys, the Springfields all get the funding they need. But in this agreement as well, there was also an agreement that all of the industrialized countries, like the United States, has to put in more money to help.
But do you think the U.S. will, with the Republicans in charge of the House?
The Republicans are obviously still led by climate deniers, which complicates the problem.
So there were going to be problems then, you're saying?
Yes, but there has to be a commitment that we made. So in the same way I grew up in Ward 2 in Malden, which is where I still live, That's the industrial ward in Malden. My mother told me not to swim in the Malden River because it was black with kind of a pre-Jimi Hendrix purple haze over it. Okay, don't swim in the Malden River, Eddie. And all around the world, we have those same wards that we have in Malden and Chelsea, and I lived in one, I still do in Malden. But we now use countries around the world, poor countries, islands. They're the sacrificial environmental zones. And we have a moral responsibility as the United States to put more money in. We have to fight through Republican opposition because this is a moral obligation that we have to countries that have not industrialized and are now paying the price for the affluence of the West.